The next topic in line we prepared for you are the physical inventory documents in SAP Extended Warehouse Management. In this episode, we are going to highlight the different database tables involved while creating, counting, and posting the inventory documents. So to get started, let us first have a look at how many tables we are going to focus on in this episode. Today, we are talking about 4 different tables. The first table in play is the header data table for physical inventory documents. This table mainly describes the header data of the physical inventory document. Like with almost any objects in SAP EWM, the physical inventory document is obviously handled by an own GUID number as well. This GUID also serves as the key to the database. Other important information in this table is the plain text document number and the document year of the physical inventory document. You might wonder why we need a separate field for the document year, or saying it a different way, an indicator in which year a physical inventory document was created. That is because the inventory document number ranges are maintained per year, which means that the document number 1, for example, can exist in the year 2019 and also in the year 2020 for the first created physical inventory document for each of those years. That is why we need this information on database level. The next table in line we are going to have a look at is the so-called business key item table for physical inventory documents. This table basically stores all the objects involved while creating, counting, and posting an inventory document. Such objects are, for example, the bin the document was created for, if there was some kind of handling unit involved, and of course, if we got stock involved. All that sort of hierarchy is stored in this table. But just to be clear, this table has nothing to do with the actual counting results of an inventory document. This table only holds the different elements involved for such a document. We will have a look at the separate entries in this table during the course of this episode. And since we got some other tables we need to focus on, let us continue with the next one in line, the quantities for the physical inventory document. For each status of the physical inventory document, this table stores the different quantity entries, and this quantity is separated into 2 different fields on database level. The system quantity, which holds the quantity of the EWM object, and the counted quantity. This quantity is basically the quantity the user counted while processing the physical inventory document. We are going to leave it at that definition for now and go on to the last table we want to mention during this course introduction. And the last table is the storage bin table. But since we already know the storage bin table from our previous episodes, we are going to skip the explanation, cause we want you to focus on the ones we do not know up till now. Now, we are going to leave the introduction because we want to see the database. And cause we are talking about physical inventory documents right now, we of course need to create such a document first. And for creating such an inventory document, we need to decide what kind of document we want to create. As you know, there are 2 kinds of how such a document can be created in the SAP Extended Warehouse Management. We got storage bin specific documents and we got product specific documents. In this example we are going to show you, we will be working with a storage bin specific document. So basically the first step we are going to do is to check out the storage bin we want to count. This time we are going to do that with a pack transaction. We enter the storage bin we later want to count and we execute our selection. As we now can see, there is only one handling unit standing on the bin we just entered. and in this handling unit we got one piece of stock. We mainly called this pack transaction up front, so we can see what kind of example we are going to work with during this episode. Now let us go on to creating the physical inventory document. We call the transaction to create such a document. We select the storage bin option from the drop-down menu, and we enter the same storage bin we just had a look at in the pack transaction. The EWM now creates a temporary inventory document, and we just need to save it. In the status line, we can now see that the creation was successfully done by the EWM system. And that is basically everything we need to do in order to create such a document. Now, since we are all here to learn something about how the database behind all this works, let us check that out. We jump to the database table selection and we enter the first table we are going to have a look at, the header data of the physical inventory document. We are starting with this specific table because of the 3 inventory document tables we mentioned during the beginning of this episode. This table is the only one of those that contains the plain text number of our document. So in order to check out the other tables later, we need to go with this table first. So let us enter the document number we just created, and of course the year the document was created in. Now we execute our selection. And there it is, our header data for the physical inventory document. Besides the information we already showed you in the beginning of this episode, there is not much left to say about this database. The most important information for us right now is the GUID number for our document. The rest of the information we can see is pretty easy to understand, since it is basically just a reminder that this document exists. Now, in order to check out the other tables, we need the GUID number. So we copy that value and head back to the SE16. We now enter the table for the business key items of the document. Now we need to paste our copied value in the GUID field and we execute our selection. As we can see, we already got 3 different values in this table. But why do we already have so much entries? Let me explain that to you. As a short reminder, let us just have a quick look at the packing hierarchy again. And as another reminder from the introduction to this episode, the table we are looking at right now contains the different objects involved for our physical inventory document. And we got the same exact connection right here. The first entry, marked with line index 1, represents the storage bin of our document. The second line, marked with the index line 2, represents the handling unit on our storage bin. And as you already might have guessed, the third line, marked with line index 3, represents the actual stock in our handling unit on the bin. We can also check that connection in the details to the different entries. Let us just select all 3 of the table entries. If we now check out the first one, we can see that this is the line for the storage bin. If we now go on to the next line and scroll to the exact same position like we did before, we can now see the second layer of the hierarchy, the handling unit stored on the storage bin. And of course, if we go on to the last line, we can see that the stock data is filled. Like for example, the product number, the batch, and the entitled to dispose. Basically the exact same hierarchy we just saw in the pack transaction. Well done, now let us have a look at the next physical inventory document table. We head back to the SE16 and we enter the table for the quantities of the physical inventory documents. We again enter the GUID number and we execute the selection. This time we can see that we got one quantity entry. This entry holds the initial system state at the moment. Our line index equals 1. The quantity is also 1. because our handling unit contains exactly one piece, and the entered quantity is 0, because, well, we never entered any quantity. Now that we showed you the initial state of our physical inventory document, we need something to happen with it, and in order to do that, we head back to the transaction for processing inventory documents. Here we enter our document number and we execute it. We now want to count our physical inventory document, and in order to do that, we obviously click on the Count button. In the pop-up, I'm just going to enter my SAP user and confirm it. In the tab in the lower part of the screen, the EWM automatically filled an initial line for the counting process. We now need to enhance that with the information we got. The first step we are going to do is to enter an item category, and we also enter our handling unit number. But before we go on, let me just explain this line, as it is now displayed on the screen. The parent type L stands for location, and the item category H clearly stands for handling unit. The first line basically tells the EWM that the bin we want to count contains one handling unit. But we did not say anything about the stock, so let us append another line to the counting tab. The next step we need to do right now is to change the parent object, because this time we want to count the stock itself. We change the L for location to an H for handling unit. And as the item category, we select S for stock. Now the hierarchy is complete. We want to count the stock on one storage bin. That storage bin contains one handling unit, and the handling unit again contains the actual stock, just the way the system shows the information in the packing hierarchy. So now that we got the counting levels right, we need to supply the information about the stock. We enter the product stored in our handling unit, and of course the quantity, in our example, one piece. Since we operate batches in our training warehouse system, we need to enter that value as well. And as we already know, we need some information about the stock type, in our case F8. Don't worry, we are soon finished with entering stuff. If we are working with stock in EWM, the entitled to dispose and the owner are also mandatory. And the final input we need to make is the handling unit number. And there we have it. We can now save our counting results. And that is it. We successfully counted and posted our physical inventory document. Because we counted the same quantity we already had stored in our handling unit, we assume that nothing has changed considering the stock. But just to make sure, let us have a look at the pack transaction again. We enter the counted storage bin and we execute it. And our assumption was correct. There has been one piece in the handling unit. We counted and posted the physical inventory document for this one piece, and as a result, nothing has changed regarding the stock. But since we are not here to talk about the stock, let us have a look at the database for the inventory document. We head back to the SE16, and the first table we are going to check out is the header data table. We enter the document year and of course the document number, and we execute our selection. And as we can see, we do not see any changes, because if you have a look at the database fields, there are no fields that could change anyway. So let us check out some other tables that actually did change, like the business key item table. We enter our GUID and we execute the selection. Instead of the 3 lines we saw when the document was just created, we now see 9 lines. But why do we see 9? That's pretty easy to explain. This table is in charge of the objects for our specific physical inventory document, and since our hierarchy consists of 3 levels, we got 3 lines in the table. And since creating the document, there were 6 lines added to those objects. 3 for the counted state and another 3 for the posted objects. Summed up, that gives us 3 lines per state and 9 lines in total. The last table regarding the physical inventory documents we are going to check out are the document quantities. We enter the GUID number again and we execute it. And just like we had it with the previous table, there were new lines inserted into this one. 1 additional line for each processed state of the document. 1 line for the counted quantity. Here we can also see the actual quantity we entered during the counting process. And 1 line for the posting quantity of the document. So that's about it for the tables on the physical inventory documents. Now let's go on to the final table we mentioned during the beginning to this episode, but we did not really explain this one during the course of the overview, because it was just the storage bin table. We enter the warehouse number and the storage bin we just counted, and we execute our selection. We can now see that the counting and posting process was also saved on storage bin level. That is a pretty helpful solution for the warehouse control center and obviously for the auditors, to basically get an overview over what bins got counted last and can maybe skipped during the course of a deadline inventory process. Now, that is basically it, our episode on the physical inventory documents. But like we always do, let us do a short recap at the end to sum up the process. When creating an inventory document, the EWM creates the header entry and the business key entries for all the involved items, like the bin, the handling unit and the stock. And there is also an initial insert in the quantity table. When you process the physical inventory document, the business key table and the quantity table are enhanced by state-specific entries. 1 for all the items regarding the counting process and 1 for all the items being posted. Additionally, the posted inventory document is saved on storage bin level to get a better overview over the inventory process. So, that is a wrap on today's episode. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did.